Hey, what's happening, all my duckies out there? I'm Duuz-Diz-Din, and I'm back with another DuckTales 2017 reboot episode review. This time it's season 3, episode 15, titled New Gods on the Block. Let's jump in, shall we? Now, this episode is polarizing for me at least because there's certain element that are in this episode that don't gel completely with me. I don't hate the episode, don't get me wrong. It's just certain things that I'm not too keen on for the most part, but let's get through and I'll bring them up as I go. So we open up with Scrooge and the kids trying to get the helmet of Genghis Khan, which is actually an old Karl Barks storyline from back in the day. So pretty cool. But it's guarded by, of all things, massive silkworms. So, Scrooge immediately concocts a plan in order to get past it using teamwork and grab the helmet of Genghis Khan. And it fails. Like, we immediately cut to it having failed. The kids are completely crushed and despondent. Scrooge is in a really depressed state. But Della immediately shows that, Scrooge gets over it. You know, he didn't become the richest duck in the world by sulking over losses. But, whereas the kids, are heartened by this. They're just like, yeah, we can try one more time. We can do it better, once again. But then Scrooge suggests creating a new team of people to actually be able to grab the helmet. And it makes the kids feel like, oh, Scrooge is replacing us. And Della is amazing in this episode. In some ways. And that's because she does her best in order to try to make the kids feel better about all this. Like, reinforce that, they're special, they're incredibly needed. Scrooge hasn't basically forsaken them. But at the same time, I feel like, man, you kids have been through so much. You have done so much. You shouldn't need validation in this way. But then again, Della, even goes on to say later on that they're kids. Sometimes kids need validation in what they're doing to feel like what they do actually matters. So maybe my emotions on this are unfounded. Maybe my opinions are unfounded. But let me know in the comments below. How do you feel about this whole angle of all of the kids feeling like they're not good enough? Like, it really does feel like they should know that they are beyond good enough. But maybe it's just how kids are. Sometimes they need that affirmation. But all of a sudden, the gods show up. The pantheon next door, I guess you could say, with Zeus, Storkules, and Selene. And, they've basically shown up because they've taken away Zeus's wreath, which grants him his powers. Because the last time he actually did something good for the gods was taking down the Titans of old. If you don't know anything about Greek mythology, it is through defeating the Titans that Zeus was able to become High God of Olympus. At least that's what I remember. Sometimes I'm a little sketchy on the details because so many things adapt Greek mythology. But, Selena has actually come here to bequeath a member of the Duck family godly powers. Yes, yes. Man, ain't it great knowing gods? But Storkules, he wants to go and find Donald because, of course, he wants his boy to have the opportunity to become a Greek god. However, Selene has actually chosen Della to become a godly entity. And the kids kind of thinking, oh, maybe we could have been gods? But once Della is chosen, they feel like, okay, yeah, of course, we probably wouldn't have been good gods anyway. So, it's just this constant theme of them being down on themselves. That is just it feels uncomfortable for me, but maybe that's because I've really invested a lot in these kids. And so has Della, as she puts forth the idea of potentially having the kids become gods. I don't know how I feel about this because it's just like, Della, that's so heartening to give up being a god to make your children feel better. That's very sweet. But at the same time, even Celine calls out, they're kids. Why would you give the powers of gods to children? But Celine goes with it in the end because ultimately they couldn't be any less mature than Zeus. Also, I love the fact that they made Zeus such a jerk. Because honestly, Greek mythology, yeah, Zeus is a jerk. Zeus is an out and out jerk. They don't display all the ways that he's a jerk because he's not sleeping with anything that moves, but he tends to be a jerk. And so we cut over to Donald, who is actually getting ready for a date, only for Storkules to come in, and it's the worst possible timing because it is in fact his second date with Daisy. Yes, second date. It's been so good so far that he's gotten a second one in, but unfortunately Storkules has invited himself on the date. Meanwhile, they set up for Celine sets up to have auditions to give each of the kids a chance at, showing what they would be as a god. So first up is Louis. Naturally, he wants to become this god of wealth with the Midas touch, or he calls it the Louis touch, immediately trademarks that. Golden touch, basically. And so he set out into the mortal realm, which is just the park, a few blocks over. And he unfortunately immediately starts turning things to gold that shouldn't be turned to gold. A stick that a dog was playing with, only to accidentally turn the dog to gold, only for him to trip and fall and turn everyone to gold. And it's just like, yeah, I messed up big time. But then Celine turns everything back to normal, and Louis doesn't get to keep any of the gold. So, sad Louis. Meanwhile, Zeus thinks that once all the kids fail, that he'll get his powers back. But Celine says, nah, if we fail here, I'll just go, like, out into the world and try to find somebody else. So Celine's really determined not to give Zeus his powers back. But Scrooge questions, like, what are these gods doing in my house? And Della fills him in that, we're trying to get the kids to become gods because, we want them to feel like they have some worth and all that. And Scrooge doesn't connect the dots of what's going on, still trying to figure out a new team to get the crown of Genghis Khan. He figures he doesn't pay any mind to all this god malarkey. Meanwhile, Storkules has very much invited himself on Daisy and Donald's date. And the thing about this that gets me is the fact that Storkules has become very one note. Storkules shows up, he's annoying to Donald, eventually they reach some kind of reconciliation. They're pals, more or less. End of episode. And that's always kind of how it goes. And, Storkules isn't a bad character, but he feels very Launchpad in a world where we already have Launchpad. I don't need other Launchpad. I don't need godly Launchpad because Launchpad is already godly. So, that's my mixed emotions there. But immediately Daisy starts to get annoyed with all of this. And so Storkules feels like he can do something in order to make sure that, she ends up loving Donald regardless of her own emotions, basically. But meanwhile, it's now Huey's turn to become a god, and he chooses the god of knowledge. And so he goes out into the mortal realm in order to, predict things for people, avert disaster for people. Unfortunately, he starts to interrupt people whose future was to basically break up somewhere down the line, only for him to cause that immediately with his foretelling about how they'll be in the future. And so they immediately break up. On one hand, it's just like, well, they didn't waste all that time being together, but on the other hand, not going through all those trials and tribulations, sometimes you become a better person through your failures. So it's a mixed bag on this one. But Huey starts just spouting out all these future issues and this and that, and his head starts to overload. And yeah, Huey definitely swears off all that knowledge. He knew a little too much. Meanwhile, Zeus contacts none other than Hades, the keeper of the Titans and the underworld, and begs him to release the Titans so that he might show off his godhood, regain his godhood, just like he did in olden times. But Hades knows that Zeus has no power, and it's become this massive joke throughout the pantheon. And I just love how Hades is this emo dude texting people on his throne of skulls. So metal. But yeah, he doesn't agree to this in terms of Zeus because he's just like, yeah, you have no power, you old man. You don't lead anything. Meanwhile, it's now Webby's turn, and she chooses to become the god of friendship and sunny days, which gives her weather manipulation abilities. So she arrives on the pier, and it's all dark and overcast and gloomy. So she creates a sunny day for everyone, but she also forces people to be friends. And when she sees any fighting or people not being friends and all that good stuff, she forces them to be friends and brings down divine wrath, just engulfing the pier in flames. So, yeah, she went a little mad with power there. And when it's finally Dewey's turn for godhood, all he does is a dance audition, and it's just like, well, the audition is now over, but you didn't use any god powers. And Dewey's just like, oh, right, can I get a do over? And it's like, no, you don't get a do over, Dewey. And so all the kids have failed. Speaking of which, while at first glance Donald and Daisy's date is going pretty well, in comes Storkules with Cupid's bow, but it just wrecks Donald's ship, sinking it, and we also find out that he disposes of his trash by just dumping it into the pool, which, Donald, come on, dude. And Daisy kind of starts to feel like maybe, being involved with Donald is a mistake, and so she walks off, leaving Donald despondent. And we also have a moment where Celine goes over everything and decides that, yeah, none of the kids are worthy at this point in their lives of being gods, which really disheartens all of the kids. And, it really just hits them pretty heavy. So, they're at a loss as well. Meanwhile, Zeus hits up Storkules because he's off crying about everything that has happened. He's feeling really sad and, questions how he can make things right. So Zeus tells him the story of how he defeated the Titan Kronos, which is actually his father in Greek mythology. But he defeated the Titan Kronos and was able to gain his god status from that. So, Zeus says that if Storkules were to, unleash one of the Titans and Donald defeat it, they would win back the heart of Daisy because that's how he got his wife as well. So, he's basically lying to his kid in order to manipulate him in a way of regaining his godhood. So, A plus parenting, Zeus. So Storkules does just that, unleashes one of the Titans. The kids, feeling down, and Della tries her best to talk them up a little bit. And once Scrooge is setting out, because he's created this whole team of Jin, Miss Quackfester, and Penumbra, and he's ready to set out, suddenly there's a rum-tum-tumbling outside. And as Daisy's driving off, she sees one of the Titans unleash and immediately heads back in order to make sure Donald's alright. What a girl. But Donald isn't all right as he's been captured, as everyone runs to his aid, and Storkules and Daisy arrive on the scene, and Storkules thinks that everything should be alright, only for Donald to get eaten. But he's just in the belly of the beast, which is transparent for some reason. I don't know. Is this Kronos? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, certain. So in comes Selene, blasting the creature, and Storkules beating it with a tree, only for all of them to be captured, including Zeus, who tries to go after the wreath. But all of them are consumed and captured, as Scrooge and Della scale the beast, but Scrooge questions why the kids don't seem to be wanting to get involved with any of this, actually helping out. And Della lets him know that because of all his seeking out of another team, he hasn't been showing the kids that he has faith in them. So they're starting to get down on themselves. They feel like they're not good enough. And, Scrooge takes a moment to tell the kids, look, kids, I'm not doing this because I don't think you're good enough. You're amazing. You're fantastic. You're the best team I've ever had. I'm sorry if I, made you feel like you weren't. But, you know, oh, I didn't think this would be the issue it's been made out to be. And, you know, because of that, I'm sorry for being inconsiderate and not showing you that I really appreciate you. Only for him to get eaten as well. And so the kids run after the wreath in order to get the power to take down the Titan. And as the Titan tries to go after them, in comes Daisy with her own godly power, the power of rage. Which, Donald's just like, yeah, that's my girl. And so the kids gain back their godly powers. Huey helps to strategize with his foresight. In comes Louie with his golden touch, disabling the Titan's limbs. In comes Dewey with his fabulous godly dancing skills, which still has super strength behind it, so he's able to beat down the Titan. And Webby, with her friendship weather manipulation abilities, shocks the Titan into submission, bringing it down and causing it to expel all of our heroes. And so Daisy and Donald share in this wonderful embrace, and Storkules joins in too because he still hasn't got the hint. And, as the kids hand over their godly powers and all that good stuff, Scrooge lets them know that they're great, they're fantastic, and he never has ever wanted them to make them feel like they are anything less. And they don't need godhood in order to prove that they are wonderful. Only for Zeus to come in and regain his powers, immediately chucking the Titan back into Tartarus. Uh, Tartarus? Yeah, Tartarus, Hades, hell, whatever. Back whence he came, saying that I've done it. Now I can regain my status on Mount Olympus, only to fall into the underworld himself. And he gets laughed at by his brother, basically. It's just like, Hades is just like, Zeus. Classic. Hilarious. So, that ends the episode. Storkules is still oblivious. The kids have gained the reaffirmation that they are the greatest, and Zeus is trapped in the other world with the Titans. It's kind of like an inverse of the movie Hercules, Disney's Hercules, where originally Hades fell in, but here you have Zeus falling in with the Titans. He tried to unleash them in order to gain control of Mount Olympus and all that. Fun times, but that's my gripes. It's just like it feels like the kids should need that affirmation because they are incredible on their own. They should need that validation, but small kids, maybe okay. Storkules, on the other hand, still kind of like, you kind of annoying. You don't need to be. You're already cool, Storkules. I'd rather they give you another storyline, but again, whatever. It's all good. It's an okay episode. Not my favorite, not the worst. But tell me in the comments below, were you feeling any of my gripes towards this episode, or did you find it was a perfectly serviceable episode? What made it serviceable and good for you? And are my opinions unfounded? Unsubscribe. But If you liked this video at all, leave me a like. If you did, feel free to leave me a dislike. Subscribe and hit the bell icon. That way you never miss out on another DuckTales episode review. And until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.